Okay. I will call to order the Monday, August 18th meeting of the Town of Dudley Government Study Committee. We'll begin by rising and doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is approval of minutes. The June 30th minutes have been out for a while, but the July 21st minutes just got posted today.
Mr. Chairman, not officially posted until you all vote on them. If you want to pass over the minutes of the 21st until the next meeting.
Uploaded to our shared drive so
Yep.
we could review them. Yeah.
Yep, you can.
So I'll entertain a motion to accept the June 30th minutes. Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, and we'll hold on the 21st until next meeting. Next is public business. Review of member research. Brian was due to do some presentation for our last meeting, which had to get canceled, and he wasn't able to attend this meeting, so we're gonna skip Brian. But I did send an email out wondering if anybody else had any chance to do any research on their topics, so we could discuss that now if anybody has anything to discuss.
I have a couple things.
Sure.
Based upon the list that Olivia supplied with some of the charter, examples of charter reviews in the previous conversation, I stated I would kind of look into some of these to see what the disposition was. And having read them to some extent, not cover to cover, some of them are, most of them aren't that relevant in terms of how you deal with, I guess, the magnitude, because a lot of these already have very strong central management structures, and you have the cyclical, review, not necessarily charter review, but the selectmen every once in a while, every so many years, would have a charter study committee, and they were more incremental than substantive entire reviews that the structure of the government itself. One of them that I did come across, though, one of those in Westminster, which is one of the more recent ones in 2020. The committee did its work, did recommend some form of, did go about its business and decide that they weren't going to go forward with a charter recommendation. They were looking at merely some updated bylaws, and that effort was ultimately disbanded. I'm very familiar with the people in Duxbury, and their last charter review was once again fairly minimal. It was really the decisions really came down to who was the appointing authority of the town planner, whether it's the town manager or the planning board, and eliminating the personnel board, which was redundant at that point because they had a professional human resources department for a number of years. So that charter was updated accordingly, and that, again, these are kind of the no-brainers. Some of these government studies aren't incredibly significant in terms of their magnitude, and I think, again, going down the list, like I said, some of these were already they were incremental steps at best. So in terms of analyzing, well, what didn't pass and why, and trying to get that dynamic, the examples weren't really they weren't helpful for that purpose. I do think they were helpful, though, in terms of a guide for how to organize a process. The types of steps that some of these studies took, and a couple of them were done by professional companies or the Collins Center. So the format for pursuing it, I think, is laid out reasonably well. And I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at them, but I do think that there is some value to maybe deciding, okay, this is a model, a process that we think would be best for us. So again, that's what I got out of that exercise, was appreciation of the process and how different communities went about the process. Because as you know, it's, kind of a little bit in the herding cat stage, trying to, people do their assignments, come back and try to bring something of value, and there's a lot of time ahead, a lot to do. But I think having a little bit of a, maybe having a little bit of a general structure that everybody thinks is worthwhile and following might be of some value. So, yeah, I'm happy to maybe work with somebody, or maybe even Rich, and just kind of throw some thoughts around as to maybe what steps might be helpful. In terms of, it seemed like they all, or most at least, did conduct some sort of study, some sort of poll or study, and I think that there's some real value to that, and I think we already decided there was some value to that. How that's put together, the kind of questions, what's possible to be analyzed, what can come out of that. I don't know who's qualified to determine that, but I think, using some other examples that may be helpful to determine those types of things. So that's my, maybe not a tremendous report, but those are some things I said I would look at. I've done that. So those are my suggestions, that maybe a couple of us just take a look and maybe, maybe suggest a format. And I don't know to what extent, trying to isolate some particular questions for a survey may be helpful. I know, I don't, maybe a little premature, because I know that's in itself a whole other effort. But I think there's some help. They're helpful guides in dealing with those two pieces. So that's my story, Mr. Chairman.
And I've been perusing a few of these as well, and maybe not with the same insight you have, because you're in town government. If they did do any surveys or any questions, were the actual surveys in the reports? So that we could see some of their questions?
Yes, I can't point out exactly which ones, because, but the answer is yes, and there were some, the analysis, some pretty, charts, were specifically analyzing, demonstrating the results of those polls, those surveys. So they took them very seriously, and the questions and the results are included in some of them. Like I said, I can't recall exactly which ones at this point.
I think when we do finish this process, and again, I think you must have like a camera in my house, because I was thinking about this.
I said I wouldn't tell.
Getting to the end, what do we want to end up with? Is it a 92-page dissertation, like for a master's thesis or something, or is this more of a question and answer type thing? Like, do we pose each topic as a question? Should we do this? Should the town of Dudley do this? And then have the pros and cons. Ultimately, we have to try to convince people that this needs to be voted on, right? So we need to provide them with the pros and cons, or the benefits, or the maybe the detriment of any of these things.
And I think I agree with you that I don't think it's something that should be proposed ultimately as an all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It may be ultimately the decision of the committee that this should be one proposal, but looking at some of the same literature you looked at, that's part of that tends to be some of the presentation as to, again, should we do this or should we not? But again, you're also looking at a context of where are these particular towns in their government structure at the time these reviews were conducted. Okay. So as you get to, let's pick, let me just, as an example, like Duxbury, because I'm quite familiar with Duxbury and the people who've worked there for the last generation. They're going into a government study committee with a format, a strong town manager format, that has seemingly well received for many years. So what they're looking at, like I said, is very incremental. So for them to be looking at very specific types of issues, is very appropriate for them, because they're only looking at, at a few, incremental changes possibly to the town government, which has existed for quite some time, and there's no, momentum to change the basic form of that government. And I don't, it maybe I'm stepping out of my lane a little bit by suggesting that Dudley's in a different place in terms of its current form of government, and where the end game ought to be. When you have a very, this town doesn't have, other than through some bylaws, doesn't have a very defined form of government. And I think some of these analyses or studies are the results of those, and the format of those are very specific to what they have in place at the time. So we have to be cognizant of that. So we're kind of picking and choosing, what elements in the approach. I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that what's the comparable to where Dudley is today in terms of how a process is run. So, but we're kind of thinking along the same lines, because sometimes the take it or leave it structure, whether it's for a charter or a legislative act, the take it or leave it approach a lot of times is leave it. Yeah, I mean that's a flip of the coin sometimes.
Exactly.
Versus some, very solid movement, and then incremental over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So different ways to look at it. I mean, I think most of us always come to a conclusion that this is the way it should be. Let's see if the town will approve it. Well, that's great. But personal opinions alone aren't what we all understand. That's not what always carries the day, so.
And in my opinion, having a very rigid approach from our angle, it might waste our time.
Yeah, and to this, I think you brought up the point also that some of these studies, you're talking about an ungodly amount of time, energy, and some of it, and I don't want to be critical, but some of it is extremely unnecessary. And I've seen this before, where you have these reports and bylaws and even bylaws that are incorporated into some towns right now. They're kind of generic, but they presume to tell you why you need to do this. Well, we know why we need to have a strong personnel situation. We don't need to know it's to for the purpose of developing a great workforce, and good morale, and good evaluation. Well, we know all that. Okay, so sometimes, to the extent that you build these documents that are hard to read because you have a lot of stuff in there that we just don't need to hear. Okay, some of it's self-evident. So I personally think the simpler, the better. It's got to be something, to me, people can pick up and read in 20 minutes to a half an hour, or read the executive summary and the conclusions, and not bother with this. A lot of people don't want to do that, and I don't blame them. We all do it all the time. How much time do we have to read things? So if people want to read a document that's 70 pages, that's great. But if people want to read something that may be 25 pages, is concise to the point, and doesn't lecture everybody as to why this is important and why we're here, and I think simpler is the better, and I think it also achieves, I think it might be even more effective, because people's attention spans are only so long. I could talk all night, Mr. Chairman. As Paul knows, I could talk.
Wise words. And eventually, we were, I think, also planning on even having some open meetings where the public could come in and comment perhaps, or, we can get their opinion live in person and through a survey.
Can I just clarify, so the history here, there was a charter recommended in 2004, and it was not voted on, correct? We did not pass it as a town?
I'm looking to Olivia, because she probably knows or can find the dates much quicker than I can.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll see if I can find the dates. We do not have a charter. I know there have been two attempts, I believe one in the nineties, the early
1990,
nineties, and then one I think in 2004.
Okay, cause I'm looking at some language that I found, on a 2004 special charter, special act charter. So I just wanted to verify that that was not accepted by voters.
Correct.
And a charter recommendation is all or nothing. So, I mean, you probably already knew that, so it's you accept it or you don't accept it. So it's not like a piece of or multiple recommendations of special acts, you know, to do certain things, which could be accepted on a piecemeal basis.
So, Mr. Chair, I do agree with Mr. LaFond on, you know, in the past 25 years, there's been two charter commissions looking at how the overall management of the community operates, and they both went, you know, for broke, and they both failed. So I agree with, you know, we should look at both sides, you know, special act for chipping away at certain things, and then charter, and then we can present two ideas. But I think it's more sensible for the community to kind of like chip away at certain things piece by piece. So, you know, maybe looking at special legislation for a couple of things here and there.
Does a charter, so in a charter form of government, that, I'm trying to choose my words just not carefully, but just wisely. It kind of takes power out of the Board of Selectmen and puts it into like a chief, like the town manager, a chief executive officer of the town. Is that a correct?
Well, that is generally what happens, but it doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to.
Correct. I mean,
Okay.
that tends to be the result of a charter.
Usually when you hear that, that's the case.
That's usually the case.
What would happen in lieu of that?
Well, in lieu of that, you could have a special act of the legislature, those are passed purely by town meeting. Those don't require a vote at the ballot box.
Okay.
A town meeting would authorize the Board of Selectmen to petition the legislature for an act that would create something. And for instance, I'm aware of where a town, through town meeting, will authorize a bylaw. And this town, I think, has a pretty good town administrative bylaw to start with. And this is my own experience, where the town would petition the legislature to incorporate that as a special act, not just as a bylaw. So now you have, the town has now established a legal form of government outside of an actual charter that could be changed short of going through an entire charter process. So presumably if you have an act, and this was my experience in Carver, where a special act was created that created the position of town administrator. And it outlined the role, the authority of a town administrator. And within that, it also effectively created some structure. That act also increased the size of the board from 3 to 5 members. Through the town administrator, it gave selectmen authority to veto appointments. Appointments that otherwise, as an example, you know, you might have, again, your individual departments, heads, or elected officials that could be appointing boards and committees. Well, I mean, the boards and committees that could be appointing personnel. Well, that was eliminated. The town administrator has this appointing authority, but the board has veto authority over certain positions. So the checks and balances in there, but you've centralized the government to the extent you choose to, based upon what kind of checks and balances you want. And that's only a vote of town meeting to petition the legislature. So, and that's the extent to which Carver went. In years, subsequent years after I left, they went through the process of getting a special act to create a finance director position and department. Personally, don't think that was necessary, but I wasn't there. I think for the size of that town, it was overkill. I mean, if you have appointing authority over these positions, you can simply authorize one of those people to be the finance director. So, so sometimes too much regulation ties your hands. So to the extent that, and I don't know this, and this is, you know, those of you who are citizens and live here and live through it, you know, if the committee gets to a point where it doesn't think a charter is feasible for whatever reason, or even advisable, because maybe you don't want to lay out in great detail, you know, every nut and bolt of the government, you know, you might want to deal with just some general structure through a legislative act, and then over the years, fill in those blanks based upon, you know, what the fallout is. So again, in that particular situation, as we create a position, a level of authority, an organizational structure, where there's a particular checks and balances, but it brings a lot of things under that chain, but it doesn't change a lot of other things. It doesn't change the authority of your boards and committees. It you know, might change the way some of the appointments go, or again, whatever the checks and balances are on a, might change, or, you know, define how you deal with legal counsel, but it might not fundamentally change the structure of the town. So there's different approaches, and I actually thought that was pretty effective, because it's not nearly as intimidating to go from, you know, and this is not an insult to Dudley, because it's not uncommon, where you don't really have a codified form of government that flows from state statute, or that flows from a home rule petition or charter. So for instance, the authority of a Board of Health is derived purely from state statute, not from any local regulation that might impact that, like appointing authority, for instance. The same may be for a planning board. You know, your authority is derived by what state law, state statute says. So you're not doing anything on the home front to determine what you want your planning board to be doing. So you can do those things in a special act in a way that I think is less intimidating to people who don't want to read a 12-page recommendation and try to approve a 12-page document for their form of government, when maybe you can look at a series of recommended special acts in the legislature that someone can read in 20 minutes and say, I like that, I don't like this. But that doesn't change the fact that you gotta do the work to get there, but I just think that personally that may not be as intimidating to some. I mean, other places I worked, you're already starting with a charter of some sort. So that to the extent that you incrementally update that charter, it's not intimidating. That's what people are used to, having a charter. So when you're doing a charter update, you're almost doing the same thing. You know, you're working off the current form of government, and by dealing with a special act, you're putting in some form of government from which you can incrementally change that based upon the time and place. And let's face it, every change in government is based upon the time and place. Probably the same of any organization, but I haven't been in the private sector enough to know that. So that's just my early observations, on a possible future here.
In general, does the public have more or less control over their government under a charter or not? Is that do you understand my question? Like,
Well, I guess that's a philosophical question.
it is, yes. I mean, you know, as opposed to without a charter, the Board of Selectmen has more power, more
Well,
influence,
right, and
right? Is that a true statement?
Well, it depends.
It depends, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Board of Selectmen has more authority, not less, if you have a centralized government where the board has, you know, oversight, checks and balances authority. Right now, like there are some towns, and Dudley is one of them, where the Board of Selectmen doesn't have checks and balances over some elected department heads or other, you know, or you have, you know, elected departments, you know, who might possibly be going in a different direction on some issues than the selectmen. So you kind of have so to the extent that you centralize, well, the selectmen might actually have more authority. They may not have some appointing authority that they may have other had, but they might have broader authority over the whole organization than they do right now. And to the extent that, again, you're talking about authority, to the extent that, that the public wants a central accountable authority or not, you know, that's, like, that, obviously, that's a decision for each and every community.
It's a
That's
very
not
interesting
something-
survey question.
It is. I mean, you know, are you looking at an end product? You know, well, if you're looking for an end product, well, an end product sometimes leads you to a certain, you know, decision on centralizing your government or not. You know, if your primary goal is to have, you know, as many elected participants as possible in a government, just from a philosophical standpoint, not from an efficiency standpoint. Well, if that's your philosophy, well, that's your philosophy. You know, you can't knock somebody if that's the way they look at local government. But we can't answer those questions either. So what's your outcome? Is it more central professionalism? Is it more you know, elected public involvement, and we, you know, kind of take our chances? Sometimes you have good candidates, sometimes you don't.
Sometimes no candidate.
Sometimes no candidate, right? And you know, do you want, you know, you have some boards and committees that might be elected in some places. One, you know, it scares me, you know, an elected personnel board. Okay, well, can you get a personnel board that's full of personnel directors who happen to live in town, willing to, you know, this wasn't like it was even, you know, 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. You know, personnel doesn't seem like, a lot of the intricacies of personnel don't seem like a big deal until you sit in the courtroom.
Until you, exactly.
And now every dime that you thought you were saving.
Spent times 100.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know in my history, when you have, and I don't mean to be doing all the talking, but you did ask.
Yeah.
You know, when you have an independent elected board who is not versed in, you know, say an interview process. Because the line between the things you can deal with in an interview can be very, very fine. And it's very, very easy to get yourself in a lot of trouble if you don't know where that line is, if you don't know how to conduct interviews, if you don't know how to run a process to get candidates in front of a board. It's more and more intricate, and it's not our fault that it's that way. Okay, a lot of what we do when we change our government is picking up pieces that are stuffed on us by other levels of government. And Rich is having nightmares over there, I can tell. So to be able to deal with an ongoing, constantly changing environment, you know, to have volunteers who aren't personnel experts, and not tuned into the, you know, the municipal personnel network, you know, to elect those people, and again, this is just an example, okay, you can apply this to others or not. It's just not, it doesn't make sense. And once again, who's accountable when a mistake is made and you're in a courtroom? Who's responsible? So, and again, you can apply that to other areas, whether it's public safety or public health or whatever, but, you know, someone's ultimately got to be held responsible if you want in any organization, or you don't have an organization, you have a disorganization. So, but none of us can tell the people of Dudley what they want. You know?
But what we need to show them is what the differences are. So, some type of analysis of, you know, this is the current structure of government and what the pros and cons of it are versus the charter form of government would be helpful. And, you know, so education, and then, you know, asking them what they would prefer. Because I don't think many people in the town would really understand if we just ask the question, what do you want, you know, without some
Yeah.
sort of education.
I've never even thought about how government is structured and how it's run, until I started thinking about this committee, to be honest with you, and now I'm just learning a ton. I'm like, okay, I mean, it sounds like a charter is really important. But as a regular citizen, I never really gave any thought to whether Dudley had one and how Dudley was operating, and I would guess that the average citizen isn't even thinking about it, until, of course, something goes wrong, and then they're trying to get some resolution on something, and the channels are all discombobulated.
And again, like you said, this charter isn't the only other option, but yeah, usually it's a place and time.
Having lived through both charter reviews, the 1990 and 2004, the 2004 report that Olivia gave us is extensive, and I think if areas are still applicable, I think we can maybe caveat off for those particular sections, manipulate them for the current standards. But I think each charter question failed because of what we were just talking about here. It's a big step in change of governance, and people are afraid of that large change, where you had questioned, do people have that same ability to walk into town hall and say, my neighbor's dog is barking? Well, they still do, but it's just in a different manner. And this is all before a lot of social media and other avenues to get the message out. Maybe now it's easier to get the message out, but I still think that big of a change is my thinking, may not be well received for the community. You still have some that are going to look at it's working fine. So maybe, we can look at different sections of the charter review and say, well, this is what I think is important. Maybe we can focus on something to make a special act to change a couple of different things, and to Mr. LaFawn's, credit, we can chip away at it instead of, going for broke and failing again.
Can I ask a question? So, are we simply here to make a recommendation on whether we should proceed with the charter, or
This is an
or are we
advisory.
actually going to create a charter? Or is it both?
Well, my understanding is that would be both. And again,
Creating it
keeping
and
a
then
charter is
presenting it.
right. If the committee decides that they think we should have a charter, the committee will be recommending what that charter is.
Okay.
And the committee decides that there may be some value in recommending some certain legislative acts that we could propose to the town that would go to the state for their approval, but then we would be recommending exactly what those would be and the language for those.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, a question for Olivia. This is strictly advisory, correct? This
In
board?
terms of what? Can you clarify that?
Advisory as far as what direction the town will go in, whether it be leave it alone, special act to make a couple of changes, and or charter change. And it goes into the Board of Selectmen for action, correct?
Yes, from my understanding, you as a committee would be presenting your final recommendations to the Board of Selectmen.
As advisory,
Yes.
yes.
They could choose to act or not act on our recommendations.
Yes, and I can't speak for the selectmen, but I don't know if they would go against a recommendation that the Government Study Committee would have made and put months and months of work into
Sure.
at that point.
Yeah.
I think that's the good point, Paul, is to use what's already been concluded by the town as a jumping off spot.
I mean, this is years later, so some is probably not applicable. But it gives you a sense of really what the thinking was, and it certainly hasn't changed as far as what needs to be updated, as far as the way the town is, managed.
And one of the things I think is important, given the fact that, you know, in 35 years, there's been 2 reviews, you know, whatever we do, no change, tweaking, complete charter change, whatever, it needs to be reviewed in a couple of years, in 5 years after it's implemented. Is it working, is it not working, can it be tweaked a little bit more, et cetera? You know, I think it's clear that there's a difference of opinion in town, because some people worked on something, invested a lot of time, energy, and effort, and the rest of the majority of the community said thanks, but no. You know, so making sure that, you know, it'll post-date us, but that this is a continual process for the town, I think is important, especially because we're not already existing with a charter that we just want to make some tweaks to. We're, you know, potentially talking about some revolutionary type changes, you know, when you talk about going to a charter, mentally, at least for people.
I mean, I think it goes beyond just the charter, where back in 2004, or whatever the last one was, there's language in there to determine creation of a DPW, instead of having all independent highway, water, sewer, so on and so forth. But I'm not sure if anyone else has had a chance to go through the Highway Water Sewer Organizational Report that was drafted by Municipal Resources. It's an extensive report, and it gets into the nuts and bolts of how those 2 departments operate. And structurally, it sure seems that there can be changes made. So again, there's a centralized management. You know, whether you go with a DPW, whether you have some other legislation to create an oversight board or whatever. I'm just spitballing here, but it just seems as if we have 2 independent countries operating, you know, not collectively, but they're working on their own agendas, not looking at maybe what integration can be of help, whether it be manpower, management technology, so on and so forth.
Okay.
No, and that's a good point, because the public may determine that we want to consolidate DPW, but we don't want this, and you might have a charter fail,
I agree.
you know, because of this.
What you
instead.
said before, piece it in.
Yeah, yeah, so, and again, I know it's premature for the committee to decide the exact, you know, it's hard to say right now what the outcome's gonna be, but I think it's certainly good for us to know that it's not just charter or not charter. You know, because I think for some people, that's what, you know, and I think for some people in the public, and I don't mean, not just Dudley, that can be the attitude, it's charter or no charter. Well, that's not the way it has to be. So like I said, I thought that you know, there was value in looking at how some of these communities approached their study. You know, and again, can't believe I'm saying this, but again, I'm happy to kind of take a look and, you know, either with you, Mr. Chair, or Rich, and just kind of go over some of the, you know, kind of the approach that we saw that was helpful.
Absolutely.
You know, while people do their assignments, and because they're not incredibly different, as you know. I mean, there has to be some flow, some methodology to how you go about it, you know, and it's not rocket science, okay? And I think the fact that there's obviously great similarity between the reports, and again, some of these reports are done by consultants who do a lot of them over the years, so obviously, you know, it's like getting, you know, your lawyer has given 10 legal opinions on the same thing to other towns. You know, you don't want to, you might pay for a whole new opinion, but
You're not getting a
it's
unique
coming
opinion.
off the shelf, okay?
Does the Collins Center have a boilerplate that they work off?
One
Or
of
is it just
these-
as need?
One of these was done by the Collins Center, so I don't know that they have a boilerplate, but I think, I know one of these, I believe, Olivia, was a Collins Center product. It's a good point, Paul. I wonder if we can get other Collins Center products specific to.
Why reinvent the wheel if you can steal it?
Yes, that's what government does. I'm sure it's not, yeah. but maybe Olivia can track down some of that, and the format will become obvious by looking at a few of them. Sure.
So it sounds like what I've heard is, as we continue this process, we're gonna discover necessary changes that we think need to happen. And those changes may happen through a charter, or we may be able to incrementally make those changes through special acts. Is that what we're talking about? Is that what I'm getting? I just wanna make sure I
think so.
I
understood.
think so, yeah.
I think so.
Correctly.
Yes. And seeing as how the other charter attempts have failed, perhaps the incremental approach is the way to go. It lets the average citizen think, well, not maybe even have the same amount of authority they've had, but we get to a better place, a more efficient, to use Rick, more efficient way of doing government perhaps, or a more secure way of doing it. Whereas if a position is elected, and if it may be better off being appointed because of the technical capabilities or the technical requirements, maybe that's the right way to do it. Your personnel board's a perfect example. Having 3 or 4 people or 5 people on a board who know nothing about any personnel law whatsoever, that's may not be helpful.
And by the way, don't have legal access to people's personnel files. Yeah, there's that too, Just in that example, yeah.
Paul, you mentioned the prior report of, of the group that studied the last charter. Is that in our OneDrive, or is it just in the binder?
Olivia?
That would have been provided in the binder. I don't think I ended up uploading that to the OneDrive, but I can add that in tomorrow morning.
Good question.
And then also, is it possible for us to get a copy of the bylaws that the selectmen and the town are operating under currently?
They're actually right on the website.
Are
On the
they?
town website.
Mhm.
Thank
If you, I was just looking at them all, but the new town website, you can just go right in and it says town bylaws.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I like the new website, by the way.
Mr. Chair, if I could
Yes.
just speak on the topic that I was assigned, in no way is this final, this is preliminary. This is just speaking on several occasions with the Collins Center. We were talking about whether or not we want to stay with a open form of town meeting, maybe change to a representative style, so on and so forth. Speaking to a couple of different people at the Collins Center, and I'm waiting for others to come back from other comp communities. It really doesn't sound as if it's a common idea to change from an open form of town meeting to a representative town meeting. There was Town of Auburn, I forget how many years ago, they said that had changed to a representative type of town meeting. And then did Webster change to a representative town meeting?
Right, well beyond my tenure,
Yes.
Webster did change to a representative and then change back.
Okay, the question would be then, why did they change and why did they change back?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But I do know that's why the current open town meeting quorum exists, because that's like 60, I think it's like 63 people. Because that was the number of elected representatives that used to exist. So when we switch back to open, well, that's our number.
The number's there.
But I don't know why, but I will find out.
So 63
It's
people
about 63.
needed to be
yes.
elected every so often?
Yeah,
Like out of every neighborhood?
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was probably divvied up, and I don't know this, but usually with, representative town meeting, it's based upon your voting districts, precincts, and then at large.
Right.
So, speaking with the Collins Center, funny you should put it that way. I asked those questions of why would a community change to a representative town meeting instead of open town meeting, so on and so forth. And he says, boy, those are going to be difficult questions to answer, because the people that have those answers typically are not in that community any longer. They've moved on, or somebody new is there, so, you know, there it is, he's correct. It may not, the answer may not be there. It may just be a matter of they have this type of meeting and it ends there.
You know, you know, my understanding from years past, there were places that went to representative town meeting because you literally couldn't fit the people in the hall. You know, you had to find a way to get people in the hall. And you can't have 600 people in a building that only holds, you know, occupancy of 150.
Right.
So, I mean, it may sound simplistic, but I know that was some of the considerations in a couple towns, and I'm talking years ago, though. I'm talking years ago, but so sometimes it's less of a governmental structure as opposed to, you know, the necessity. But I will find out why Webster, at least in some people's opinion, why Webster reverted back to an open town meeting form of government.
I should have all of the information I can gather by the time we meet again in mid-September.
Fabulous. Okay.
And if I may, just give a brief update on my assignment, which was making sure that every position had a job description. Olivia did share some job descriptions on our shared drive, and a whole bunch of other background information about classifications and all those sorts of things. One of the things I had asked for was an FTE breakdown of current positions, and Olivia's working on that currently. I'm trying to work on it from the other end, taking an expense report and just, you know, looking at the salary accounts. But I think all of that is going to drive kind of what I hope to do is be able to give the committee and the public information about the structure, the current structure, so that it can inform the discussions about what future structures look like.
Thank you.
Rich, is it premature for me to ask you your thoughts on, you know, well, I guess that's not the way to phrase it, but the position descriptions as they exist, are they, again, same format? Are they so professionally,
Yeah, so-
professionally done either by in-house or by a consultant at what point? What's your?
So there was a consultant in 2021 that came up with different classifications, and all of the job descriptions that I've seen so far all have the same format, all have the same basic style. Yes, I think it was set up originally in 2021, and it looks like it's continuing through till now.
Good.
So, you know, those are all positive steps, you know, where 40 years ago, you know, many governments might not be so formal, but it looks like Dudley did take those steps in the last 5 years, which is great. And it's never premature to ask a question. It may be premature to answer the question.
So noted.
I guess I can go. I looked into the technology stuff. Definitely would like to send a survey out to the internal folks on like why they haven't been utilizing their systems to the fullest extent. Like, why are we not using Harper for your bill payroll all the way? What are the anxieties about doing online payroll or utilizing those programs? So I was hoping to just come up with a bunch of questions that might ask them what their hesitations are, and then we can look into how to address them so that we can go into a better payroll and all that kind of stuff. I mean, your IT is excellent. She's already been helping me all day, so I looked into that. I also looked into communications with governments, and basically it was like most really good towns or cities have like a two-way communication kind of thing. So like the town can like tell the people of the town stuff that's going on, but they also wanted to get feedback. And when the people felt more heard or had a voice, they were more happy, I guess you could say. So that was just like my preliminary looking at stuff.
Yeah, I think the concept of an internal and an external survey, I think, is a good thing we should do. Gauge the internal feelings and also the external.
Yeah, especially, what am I gonna ask the town people, like if they like to use payroll software? Like,
No,
that
yeah, well,
doesn't
yeah,
quite make sense.
specific for that.
So,
Some of our questions for the public are gonna apply internally as well,
Yeah.
so, you know.
yeah, but definitely with the technology, there's a lot of like YouTube videos now to teach you how to do anything. I learned how to make a P6 off of YouTube the other day. So it's possible that we might be able to find things to help the townsfolk. I think it's an easy hitter to save up some of your accounting folks' time. I
Anyone
just-
else wondering what a P6 is?
It's a
I am.
project manager software.
Well, I knew, I was asking because I knew others.
I think we might have a
We have a
comment.
question from the, or comment from the audience.
Good evening. Rich Carmignani, Treasurer Collector. Through the chair, who did you ask about Harper's payroll?
It was written in one of the financial management.
No, I'm sorry, I'll rephrase the question. Did you speak with anybody in the town
No.
about it? Okay, all right, because I'm scratching my head wondering, did you speak to one of my assistants? I don't remember speaking with you. So I'm sorry if I misunderstood that.
Oh no, it was written in one of the things that you guys weren't utilizing it all the way. And that you were still doing paper timesheets. Which sounds troublesome.
You don't think it sounds troublesome that the DLS recommends a specific commercial product? That was my take on it. The idea that was put in and the rationale behind it sort of was questionable, at least in my mind. If you'd gone through and listed out utilization of resources that could have been put towards something else, quantified the selection, and then pointed out, use this or similar product. But
Yeah, and I think that's why we wanted to send the survey out so we could get your opinions on it since you're the one using it.
okay.
But like
I look forward to having the conversation. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. As far as, I mean, I was jotting down things over the past couple of weeks. As far as the survey goes, I mean, do we have to put it out to the public? Randomly asking people for responses doesn't exactly, I know it's probably statistically the best way to do this, but that also seems to have a few problems in my head. Then I thought, well, you guys have the system where you alert people of things going on in the town. That's a known list of people who have agreed to join into that service. Could we perhaps use that as a means to advertise the survey or ask for the survey? Knowing that they're town resident, I suppose they don't have to be a town resident to get that service.
So, Mr. Chairman, my concern with that, and I'm not 100% sure on it, but I
don't even know if anything I just said is legal or illegal or reasonable.
Right, I think there might be some legality issues with that, because if people agreed to enter their email address to receive town alerts, they might not have agreed to receive survey requests from the town or other communications related to that. There's a specific, when they go on the website, there's a specific list of things that they opt into. They want to get the minutes and agendas posting for the Board of Health and the Planning Board.
Right.
Do they want to hear the government studies survey request? I think there are other ways we could publish that rather
Okay.
than using email addresses for that, which I don't know is allowed.
Okay.
It could be allowed, but that would be my hesitation, is
That thought crossed
people
my
didn't
mind.
opt into that. Yep.
Okay.
But we could certainly get it posted on the website in the news section, so anybody who subscribes to the news can get that email link sent to them.
It would be pointed at.
It would be pointed at anybody subscribing to the news section.
I think that's
Or
important.
subscribing to the government study updates. for
How many
example.
are involved in that update subscription? Do you have any idea?
It says that they had to make a new account with the new website, so probably not a lot.
So probably not a lot,
Not a lot. If you
it
guys
will
just
grow
launched
over
this,
time.
yeah.
but
Yeah, I don't have a number in my head, but when we did transition website platforms, people did have to resubscribe. And I don't know what boards have more subscribers. I mean, I could assume that Selectmen has more than something like Historical. just making an assumption there.
Yeah.
But as for the like number of subscribers for the news section, I think maybe Amanda could look into that and get like a number.
Did you have any insight on the old website, how many you had?
That's never something I looked into. Amanda is shaking her head no.
Okay, all right, all right.
So,
I was just wondering if just broadly casting the net is too broad. That's my only concern. But part of me says that narrowing it is not good either, so.
I think we need it to be broadcast, but I think the public needs to, I think in a way we need to encourage them.
Absolutely.
So before we even have, or while the survey is being drafted, I think we still need to say, hey folks, we're developing a survey. And then later, the survey's ready, you know, and like put it out there so that people can expect this thing and just say, you know, the government study committee is developing this. They want your input, they want and then people are prepared and people might even look for it. And then when it's ready, I think then we'll have folks who are like, oh, okay, I'll do it.
Sure.
You know, and now what form we provide it to them, then that's another story. We have to figure that out still.
Last point I thought of with the survey was, is one large survey better or worse than several smaller ones? Could we survey each topic? If we're gonna break this down into more manageable chunks and approach it probably more piecemeal, would piecemeal surveys be better so that we can focus on that and not have a 12-page survey, but 4 3-pages?
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, it might be overwhelming.
Because I'm not gonna sit down and do a 30-minute survey, because
Right.
I only
Yeah.
have 10 minutes right now. But if it's only 3 questions, yeah, I'll do that immediately.
Or even 10.
Yeah,
at most.
reasonable.
10 questions regarding this topic, or 2 topics, or whatever.
Yeah, if one topic is, or maybe 2 can be combined, or 2 are maybe simpler, maybe we could combine 2, but if it's a major topic like charter or something else, you know, that's probably a more meatier one, but if some of the other ones are smaller.
Make like the first page more informational too, so that they have the information to answer that survey. So like one of the surveys I would want to do for like the technology would be like, what forms of social media and all that stuff do you currently use? How do you keep up with your town news now? Like, what are you using the most, so we can figure out exactly what the town's favorite mode? Because like when Goose and those people got lost in the woods at my house, I had to like go through like the Facebook of the Webster police, and I don't have Facebook, and that was really hard. So like I couldn't like click or anything, and that was the only way I was getting updates about the police. I don't think that's effective. I would rather have gone to the Webster to like town page and found out like where should I stay in my house still, what's going on. But like, so that's what I was kind of thinking about, is like maybe we should ask the town like what is their preferred way. Like I read the newspaper. I know that's really odd for my age. That might not be the best way to communicate some of these things. So
Good points.
And I think if you put out bite-sized surveys as opposed to a whole meal, people might only respond to one because they're passionate about that particular topic. No, I don't want representative town meeting, or I do, and not care so much about all of the other things. And at least we can get that slice of feedback.
That's a good point.
So you say that's a good thing, actually?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, exactly, yeah. Okay, all right.
And we can also alert them to the fact that there are multiple surveys, or multiple pieces of information that we, the committee that they asked for, you know, have to share.
Okay. All right. This was a great meeting. I think, so the action items are continue to work on your respective areas. And, you know, Brian will probably for next meeting, Brian can come probably with some really good things. If anybody else is near ready or close to ready, definitely bring your material. We don't know how long these things are gonna take. I know we wanna limit the time of meetings, but if we can get to 1 or 2 items, is that okay? to get to one, how do we have to just organize the agenda appropriately? Do we have to put specifically what we're gonna discuss?
That's a good question, Mr. Chairman. I think it really depends on the topic. If it's anything requiring a vote, it has to be very specifically stated on the agenda and stated that a vote will be taken. But keeping it broad, like review of member research, which was on the agenda today, is,
I don't know about anybody else's opinion, but I think it's gonna take a few more meetings before we get anywhere close to voting. Okay, good, we got the professionals, we got the professional agreement. Sorry, I keep looking at you, but you're the most.
Other than, of course, the motions to adjourn.
Yeah. But I think it's gonna be at least a few months before we get to the point where we're gonna actually decide anything.
Given that the next meeting is in September 15th, I feel like I will have some sort of a matrix that will be able to compare our current bylaw kind of government against a charter. That's what I'll be working on. So just so that we can look at like what the differences and what the differences are.
And pros and cons.
Pros and cons of each.
How should people, Olivia, what's the best way, should people give you those things, like, and so you have them to post to the SharePoint, but we can put them on the screen as well during the meeting?
I believe you also all have upload abilities in the shared drive.
Okay.
So you could start uploading files in there if you wanted to have me go in and make a folder for each of you. I can make like a Paul Con folder. And
Would you do that?
When Paul finds relevant research, he can put it in his Paul Con folder.
Maybe each of us to have a, but we would all have access to it.
Yeah, yeah, it's
mindful
all
of
within
that.
the shared OneDrive,
Anything
but
we put in there is public and everybody can see it.
yes. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that'd be great. And then, if we wanted to, we can bring that up during the meeting. So people don't have to bring hard copies or anything. We'll see, that's
Yep.
perfect.
And Mr. Matthew just pointed out to me that the upload option on the OneDrive is grayed out, so I will have Amanda look into it and make sure that your permissions are all set to
Okay.
be able to upload,
Perfect.
instead of just view and comment.
So I'm working on communication and transparency, and I'm lost. I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to go about this. So I appreciate any advice. I worked out a little bit of an outline on the different types, the different ways in which the town of Dudley communicates with the public, which I think is fine. You know, I mean, we've got a variety of things, the website, the Facebook, you know, bulletin boards and so forth. But the transparency part, I think that part of the reason we're here is because there's a feeling of perhaps the government isn't providing information that people think they should have. And I'm not sure, how do I approach that? How do I approach the transparency part of this topic?
I was looking at the same stuff. It's kind of so broad. It's a little challenging. That's why I thought I was more gonna look at like how we're communicating, and as I said, like what platforms are you using, so that maybe they can work out a thing where they want to like launch something or like news to people. They can like hit like, okay, post this to Instagram, post this to Twitter, post this to Facebook, run down the list. But I had nothing more than that at this point.
Does the town of Dudley have a communication policy?
We do. I can put it in the drive.
I'm thinking that perhaps
That might be a good starting.
Googling that
Yeah.
with different towns, because they probably have, restrictions or guidance on what town employees can or can't post, what they can say, not what they can say or not say, but there's generally guidelines, it could also be almost IT related too. Some, like, where I work, we don't allow people to download any communication mechanism for their phones, let's say, because if they talk about things on a non-company owned platform, we don't have access to that, so if something good or bad happens, our hands are tied, right?
Yeah.
So we restrict talk about business to business-provided tools. You know, so it may get into that, but it also may get into how we communicate as well. So
And
communication
also-
policy, I think, might be a good option.
I also think part of, I mean, the communication as a word, as a topic is pretty general, but there's also communication by employees to public, you know, to clients, that is actually what I would call the public. Like when somebody goes to town hall, or when somebody goes to a town meeting or a, board meeting, how folks communicate with that person over their concern. I think sometimes, and I say this from watching meetings, I think sometimes when someone goes to a particular board, let's just say, I don't know, building commission, which we don't actually have that board, they might not know what to expect or what the process is, so they might go there not fully having all their information. So to me, that's a communication issue as well, like if you're going for something, a permit, or if you're going to a hearing, you know, having all of the information you need, or having the process laid out, so that instead of getting into a contentious argument with the person who's sitting in our seats over something that you didn't understand, you actually have information. And I think part of that goes to training of the individuals who are interacting as well. And so I've seen some things take place that I, you know, and this is just as a regular citizen, I've just been like, I think they need a little work there. And I think that goes to training, but I think it's also part of communication. And so I'm not exactly sure how to like bundle this up into something.
Start doing something.
Okay.
That's the best way to
Yeah,
get something done,
yeah.
start. And
Okay.
bring it to us,
Yeah,
and we'll help
got
you.
it.
Yeah,
Okay,
well, we can
appreciate
definitely
that.
sort through all that, but
Yeah.
if you gather a bunch of information, we'll talk through it and sort out how to best organize it, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I understand where you're
Yeah,
coming from.
yeah.
It's internal and external.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, I'm not so much concerned about sort of interdepartmental communication, and again, that's covered by whatever policies and procedures. But I think, you know, again, I'm trying to think about why am I here on this committee, and I think I'm here as a rank and file citizen to try to understand why my fellow citizens might feel a little edge of disgruntledness about the way things operate. And with regards to communication, I can definitely see some reasons that they would feel disgruntled, or maybe misinformed, or feel like some of the people that they're actually dealing with here, you know, in various capacities, might not be fully informed at what their responsibilities are to the
Right.
citizens and the residents of this town.
Well, I think ultimately, the line has to be drawn between, you know, best practices, and people doing their jobs competently. Because in the end, a lot of the things that make people, that drive them crazy, like you said, you get to a board meeting and you miss 3 steps because whether it's your planner or building commissioner hasn't laid out for you what it takes to get from here to there. That's a personnel problem, some of this, you know what I mean?
Right,
So,
right.
I think your point is excellent. I just always try to separate, you know, best practices versus people exercising those best practices. And if they don't, who do they answer to? So,
I'm in construction, and so there's a certain level of communication on a job site that is acceptable, and you
Yeah.
just gotta deal with it, get over it, you know, have some
Sure.
thick skin about it's, you know. But that doesn't mean I communicate that way everywhere. And I think there's some of that might be going on with some folks.
yeah.
In various capacities.
All right. Well.
Motion to adjourn?
And motion to adjourn, yeah. I guess
Second.
that was fast. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
I'll get to go home, thank you.
Have a good holiday.